of the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Republican voters in New Hampshire head to the polls today for their state's primary, the first in the nationwide contest to select President Obama's challenger in the November elections. Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney has been fighting to maintain his front-runner status amidst ongoing scrutiny of his tenure at the helm of private equity firm Bain Capital. After repeatedly touting his business experience as an asset towards reviving the U.S. economy, Romney's been put on the defensive in recent weeks over Bain's use of tax havens, as well as causing thousands of layoffs through buyouts and restructuring. Romney's continued to receive millions of dollars from Bain, despite having left the company in 1999. On the eve of the New Hampshire vote, Romney unintentionally provided campaign fodder to his rivals with an offhand remark, touting his health policy as a means to increase competition among health insurers. Romney said he likes to fire people.
I want individuals to have their own insurance. That means the insurance company will have an incentive to keep you healthy. It also means that if you don't like what they do, you can fire them. I like being able to fire people who provide services to me.
Romney's lead in New Hampshire has narrowed amidst the focus on his time at Bain. Hoping to revive his campaign, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich has criticized Romney for the job losses under Bain.
Apparently outlined in detail that Bain Capital acquired a company, in essence looted it, and then laid off 1,700 people. Now, if that's accurate, and if there are 3 or 4 or 5 examples like that, I think that's troubling. I don't think those of us who believe in free markets, and those of us who believe that, in fact, the whole goal of investment is entrepreneurship and job creation, would find it pretty hard to justify rich people figuring out clever legal ways to loot a company, leaving behind 1,700 families without a job.
Not all of Romney's rivals see his tenure at Bain as potential liability. On Monday, former Senator Rick Santorum, the winner of last week's Iowa caucus, refused to criticize Romney's work at Bain.
If capitalism is constructive as well as destructive, and I don't see that as necessary. I think he's got a lot more about his record as governor to talk about than his record at Bain Capital.
And that was Rick Santorum. Well, to discuss Mitt Romney, we're going to start in Washington, D.C. with Andy Sullivan, a Reuters correspondent who's just written an extensive piece on how Bain drove a Kansas City steel plant, Worldwide Grinding Systems, into bankruptcy, leading to some 750 layoffs and a federal bailout. Bain still walked away with millions of dollars in profits. And then we'll go to Kansas City to speak with one of the workers, the former steel worker who was fired. Andy, lay out the story that you have just released.
Hi, Amy. Well, we took an in-depth look at one of Bain's transactions when Romney was in charge. The company bought a steel mill in Kansas City in the early 1990s. They put up $8 million. They got other investors to kick in money. Total cost was about $80 million. And the idea was to improve the steel mill and have upgrades and have it operate more efficiently. But one of the first things they did was issue $125 million in debt at a pretty high interest rate of 12%. And they gave themselves a buyout of about $65 million out of that. So they made their money back quickly. We talked to a lot of folks, analysts, former company executives, who said that this amount of debt really sort of made it hard for the company to survive tough times a few years later down the road.
Would you say that Bain's downfall was as a result of faulty business practices?
I would. I mean, a lot of the analysts we talked to said that it certainly didn't help. And one of the most interesting interviews I did for this story was a former executive of the company, Roger Regelbrugge. He took over in 1995 when it was merged with another company. He took one look at the balance sheet and he said, well, if you guys aren't going public in 2 years, I need to get out of here because otherwise we're going to have to restructure, and that's really painful. That's no fun. We lay people off. I argue with creditors, and I don't want to do that. So, I mean, if he was saying that, I think that tells you something.
Who most benefited at Bain? Who profited?
Who profited? Well, Bain took the profits, about $12 million plus another $900,000 a year for their consulting arm. And that money goes to people who invest in Bain, and that's everything from pension funds to individual wealthy investors. Romney's made this point that Bain actually helps people who have retirement accounts. So, you know, Amy, perhaps you benefited, perhaps I benefited if we have 401ks.
And what about Mitt Romney?
Well, Mitt Romney is running for president on the strength of his business record. He's talking, this time around, he's talking less about his record as governor of Massachusetts. And his argument is that I have the know-how to fix the American economy. So while it's not surprising that we're having this debate, it perhaps is a little surprising that we're having this debate so early in the campaign when Republican rivals are going after him. They've been expecting that from President Obama.
At a Chamber of Commerce breakfast yesterday in Nashua, New Hampshire, Romney was questioned by United Auto Workers Regional Director Julie Kushner about why he objected to the Obama administration's bankruptcy plan for General Motors.
How can you say that those people from your own state of Michigan, would have been better off under bankruptcy, where they would have really very likely lost their jobs, instead of where they are today, once again, the #1 auto company in the United States? I don't understand that.
Ma'am, we've been very patient.
Okay.
We need to get to the answer now. Thank
now
you.
let's get to the answer. The answer is this. Bankruptcy is not going under and losing jobs. The president ultimately did what I suggested, going through a managed bankruptcy process. I wrote an op-ed about this. I said, excuse me, it's my turn to talk. And if you want to talk afterwards, we can come chat afterwards. But we went through General Motors and Chrysler went through a managed bankruptcy exactly as I said back, I think it was in November. It took the president 5 or 6 months to come around to that. That's what they had to do.
That was Mitt Romney answering Julie Kushner's question, Regional Director of the UAW in Nashua, New Hampshire. Joining us now from Kansas City is Joe Sopcich, former steelworker at Worldwide Grinding Systems, who's lost his job after it declared bankruptcy under Bain's control. He's speaking to us from Kansas City's PBS station, KCPT. Joe, explain what happened.
Well, I guess the first thing I noticed after the company was bought out by GST, they became very union non-friendly. I mean, they started looking for ways to eliminate jobs. In my case, in my department, they actually offered to buy our jobs out from underneath us. They cut back on safety equipment. You know, the working environment just wasn't as good as it should be.
You worked at the plant for 28 years. Explain how it changed.
Well, one of the big things that I noticed was they didn't maintain the equipment. The electric arc furnaces, when they broke down, sometimes they would set for 2 or 3 days or a week before they had parts. When AK Steel owned the company, everything was well maintained. The transportation department, all of the equipment that we had to use to haul things around the plant, a lot of it would break down, and so, you know, they would use that as an excuse to bring in outside contractors, non-union contractors. You know, they were constantly after our jobs.
What happened to your 401k?
The 401k, well, I don't think our 401k was affected. Our retirement was affected. When we got the bankruptcy deal, I lost $400 off of my retirement because the pension fund was underfunded.
Every month?
Yes, every month.
You lost $400. And what happened to your family?
Yeah. Basically what happened, my wife had to quit working, and we didn't have any health insurance on her. I went to work for a suburban school district, so I had health insurance, but I had to start out at substantially less money. I went from about $59,000 a year down to $24,800 a year, and I couldn't afford health insurance on her. And she became ill, and we discovered that she had cancer, and, you know, we had no health insurance. So the only recourse that I had was we took her to a county hospital, and unfortunately she passed away from the cancer. And when she did, I had this big bill, and the only way that the county had agreed that they would cover the bill, but I had to liquidate all of my 401ks, so I lost my 401ks.
And Mitt Romney defended Bain Capital by saying that profits went to regular people's 401ks. What message do you have overall for Mitt Romney as he runs for president of the United States?
Well, I'll tell you how I feel is that if he would run the country the way that he ran our business, I wouldn't want him in there as president.
And Andy Sullivan,
I don't think he has any sympathy for the average working person.
Andy Sullivan, last comment on your major revelation, what you were most surprised by in your piece on Bain.
Well, I think this ties in with what Joe was talking about. A big liability for the company all along was its promises to employees, its pension funds, its health care benefits, and things like that. When Bain bought the company, they worked out an agreement that the previous owner would cover these for a few years. That expired, and the union worked out a new negotiation where if the plant closed, Bain would pay for them. Okay, well, then they went bankrupt, and people like Joe are left out in the cold.
Andy Sullivan, Joe Sopcich, thanks for joining.